We are made to see the word of God in the words that he gives us in inspired scripture. And of course, he's preparing us to receive him through the words, through the sacrament, participation in the sacramental life, but also through an immersion in this beautiful art, music, and the words and the emotions and the sentiments that are expressed that go deep to the heart and open us up to receive God. And then, of course, in turn, to give that love back to him and to love our neighbor, to go out and be loving to our neighbor. And all of these things go together in harmony.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast. My guest today is David Clayton. David Clayton is an author. He wrote many books, including The Little Oratory, The Way of Beauty, The Vision for You, and Veiling to Reveal. I've read a couple of those books, and they're good. I think they're good. He's trying to save Western population, as anyone should these days, I would say. And he's been on this path for a long time. He found answers back when he was in his 20s, and he's now about the same age as me. So he has lots of wisdom to share. And I hope you enjoy the conversation and leave your comments. I'm curious to know what you think. Thanks. Hi, David.
Hello, Tammy.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I had the pleasure of meeting your wife, Margarita. She's a joy to be with. So that was really nice. And she introduced me to your books, The Way of Beauty and A Vision for You. And I've read through most of both of them. Mm-hmm. And they're very interesting. I can see the utility of them for people who are interested or even just trying to find a better way. I can see their utility for sure. And I know that you've developed a course as well. And I studied as an artist. So I did portraiture. I like to do portraiture. And so it resonated with me in lots of ways. I've done a lot of spiritual work myself. So I think we should have a nice conversation. So let's start by, you're an artist, but you have very strong faith. So can you share what first sparked a passion for blending art and faith?
Yes, so I'd always enjoyed art. My parents encouraged it, and I always thought I was quite good at it. At least, my mum and dad told me so I believe them. But was in many ways frustrated. I wasn't encouraged at school, for example, in high school, to follow that. I ended up doing sciences at university. And what happened to me was that in my mid-late 20s, I just felt I was drifting, and I met someone who showed me these spiritual exercises that I describe in the book, The Vision for You. And he encouraged me to believe that if I did these exercises, I might become an artist. I thought, this is great. And I'd seen the impact he'd had on others. And he just seemed, I couldn't see there was anything to lose in trying. And so I went through these exercises, and what happened to me is that they worked dramatically. It changed my attitude. I developed a faith. And really, that's what this guy David was trying to give me. It was faith, not really a chance to be an artist, although there's not that they need be exclusive. And so it worked very well, and we can talk more about that part of the journey later if you wish. But in the end, under his influence, probably by my early 30s, I was received into the Catholic Church, and I made a commitment to the church. and at that point decided I wanted to serve the church as an artist. And I would say that having a faith in God certainly encouraged me to try and not worry about the failure, and believe that it was possible, and if it was God's intention, it would happen. And that is certainly something that David, this mentor of mine, gave to me. So from that point on, I committed, much to the, although my parents had encouraged me, to the horror of my parents at that stage, to becoming an artist. So my life took a very different course, and I really tried to learn the practice of art and the traditions of art in the Catholic Church. And so that really began that phase of my journey. What I found was that it was very difficult to get any information on Catholic art, and very, very difficult to find a training that I felt would form me in my faith and give me the skills. And so really I had to effectively form myself. I had to do research on how artists were trained. I had to find people who could give me some of the skills I was looking for and work out how to apply them. And in the process of this, I became as interested in that process as in the practice of painting and in my faith. All of these things seem to work together. And that's where these books have come from, really.
So where did you go to? Where I think you went to Italy. Is that right? Did you go to Italy to learn about art?
Yes, I did. So I've had various forms of training. So initially, in fact, I had training in iconography through a very well-known iconographer in the UK called Aidan Hart, who I'm still very good friends with. I've known him for 30 years. And I did workshops with him, and then he would critique my work and he would help me over the years. But I felt that I wanted also to understand the Western traditions. So I went to one of these ateliers in Florence. They're run by Americans who were valiantly, well, in the 70s, effectively, they began re-establishing the traditional method of naturalistic drawing that was developed in the Renaissance period. It's called the academic method, named after Plato's academy. They opened academies because they wanted to try and make the association of something that was worthy and noble and worthy of these ideals. So it's called the academic method. And I studied that in Florence for a year with someone called Charles Cecil. And his focus was on portraiture as well. And so that's what I did. And I'm glad, because he he pushed you very quickly through it. Some places they go very slowly, but it was a bit of, Charles tended to throw you in the deep end a bit, and I really appreciated that. He also did these wonderful lectures where he pointed out in naturalistic art, the features, the form of Baroque art, particularly in the 17th century, which he felt was the ideal, really, the pinnacle of this method. And so I found that very, very helpful. And so I did one academic year with Charles, that's all.
So this is very funny. So, or I don't know, serendipitous or something. So last year, I guess it was last year, in September, I believe, I went for 1 month and I studied with Cecil Studio.
Oh,
I did
okay.
2 weeks. It was a 2-week course. Oh, it was intense. Oh, it was intense. I did 2 days, I think, of drawing, where I prepared from the models. There were 2 models. And then the rest of the time I painted them. And I learned so much. And they called it sight-size painting, right? Where you stand far away to get the light. And so when you're talking about it, the Baroque, you're talking about light, I imagine, are you?
Well, there are various definitions. The Baroque style is, when I refer to it, I'm thinking of the style of the 17th century in Western Europe. So it's artists such as Velázquez, who's always seen as one of the greatest, or Ribera, or Georges de Latour. And as you say, you set the studio up with this 45-degree light. You have deep shadow on one side, striking light on the other. Perhaps if anybody knows Caravaggio's art, for example, everything is set up so that you have this light somewhere out of sight, but hitting all the figures at a consistent angle. And they would set the studio up like just as you describe. And yes, and the sight size is where you walk backwards to a point where the image, the painting, and the object that you're painting are the same size as you look at them. The angle of vision is the same. And then you compare the two, and then you memorize a correction that needs to be made, and you walk forward, and then you make the correction, and then you walk back to the spot and you check whether it was correct or not. So aside from learning to paint, everybody lost weight in the course of this year.
That's right. Yeah, it was, I loved it. I loved it. And I stayed in Florence, only a 10-minute walk from the atelier. So I could walk through the old city there and back. And that was also very inspiring.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful place. I'd love to go back again, and I'll try to for sure. But it's very interesting that you worked with the same person as me, and that it was only just last year that I met him. And you met him how many years ago?
I was there in about 2005, something like that. So 20 years ago.
He looks good. He looks good.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that this art keeps him young.
Well,
and his fight to keep it alive,
Well, he certainly has that, and that's great. And then also, if you're painting, you're probably walking 5 miles a day or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He looks fit. Yeah. That's right. So who knows? Anyway, that was quite something.
Oh, I haven't spoken to him for years. I might send him a note. Actually,
I think you might have to. Yeah.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
I'll let him know we talked about it.
And so you've done work in England and in the U.S. And so,
yes.
How did that transition happen that you went from England to the U.S.?
Well, as you can hear, I'm English. I grew up in the US. And I always felt that I had more chance of succeeding in the US. And also the US would be more receptive to the wider vision I had, the mission I had. So I was learning from Aidan iconography. I went to Charles Cecil, and I just want to mention one thing, and that the effect of learning to draw so systematically, as you described, is that impacted everything else that I did. The quality of the iconography that I did went up by orders of magnitude, I would say, as a result of this training. It was a fantastic training. And so I started to believe that I could do it, and I was beginning to get commissions in the UK. I had a few. But I wanted to go to the US. I was always interested because, for me, this is part of a wider mission to really preserve Western culture and re-establish Western culture as a Christian culture of beauty, which is what I believe it is. And I think we can separate it from the faith. That doesn't mean everybody has to be Christian, but it means the culture is a reflection of Christian values. And if that's to be the case, there's a task of evangelization here. I think beauty has a large part to play in that, in opening people's hearts so that they're receptive to the word. I felt that the US is the place that is most influential in the West, and so I wanted to contribute there. Mm-hmm. Also, I felt that if it was going to happen anywhere, it would be there, because there are more people in the US, a greater proportion of people would actually believe what I've just said. For example, in the UK, you have difficulty convincing anybody that there's even a problem. It's so secular. And so the other thing is that in the US, there's more Catholics, more Christians, and more money. And so there was likely to be resources available and other people available to make this happen. And I have to say also that I love the American attitude of rolling up your sleeves and getting on with things and giving them a try. They tend to be optimistic and positive. I love Britain, I love my home country, but there's a cynicism and a skepticism which makes for a wonderful, dry sense of humour, but it sometimes means that everything goes round and round in a committee and it doesn't get done. Whereas I just had this view that in America this would work. So I'd always been looking for opportunities to go there. And eventually I was given an opportunity to go and work for a small Catholic liberal arts college in New Hampshire called Thomas More College of Liberal Arts, where I was the artist in residence. And so I was hired to fill the chapel with art, which was just a dream come true. And I did that for 7 wonderful years. I loved being there. And at the same time, I started to teach these ideas that I developed. They allowed me to teach a course there and lecture
Wow.
on it, which was terrific. And I then started to write them down, and I started a blog, and I started to communicate these things. And that's where I developed whatever writing skills I have that enabled me to write the books. And the books I've written really are the pulling together of all that writing. I've been writing 1 or 2 blog articles a week for about 15 years now. Maybe at some point the ideas will run out, but they haven't yet.
I guess it depends where you get your inspiration, right?
I think so. I think I'm thinking I've tapped into the infinite, but of course the infinite has a mind also, and he may not decide. He may decide to turn the tap off, but that's up to him.
True. Oh, so in one of your books, in The Way of Beauty, you talk about harmony and proportion.
Yes.
And I'd have to read it again, especially the geometry, because it was very specific. But I'd like you to expound on how it relates to the divine beauty that you're trying to portray.
Okay, so I think harmony and proportion, it's broadly speaking a study of the mathematics of beauty. And of course, that's something that would surprise many people, that even is such a thing, but traditionally there always was. So the starting assumption here is that when something appears beautiful, of course, there's a personal reaction to it. We have to be able to apprehend beauty. We have to be able to see it, and our senses must be able to sense it. So there is a personal response. But at the same time, there is something real in that object that makes it beautiful. There is a form, there is a structure. So we're talking about what the philosophers would call objective beauty. It's in the object. And that was always the assumption in the past. It's a relatively new thing, an aspect of the modern era that says it's only about personal response. And in order to study those things, therefore, study the objects that are beautiful, there's a motivation there if you think it's part of the structure. And it's natural to think of them as that structure being mathematical, because that is the basis of order and harmony. And so music seems to suggest this. Music is somewhere where we naturally are aware of notes that work together, and this is where a lot of this analysis comes from, and they can be easily turned into numerical relationships just simply by the relative lengths of pieces of string, for example, or chord on a guitar, or the lengths of organ pipes. And right back to the ancient Greeks, they were aware of that. And so there is a study of the mathematical structure of things in light of that. And the assumption then is that once you discover that, and music really is the main way of accessing this. Once people find it in music, they then see those patterns in nature in other ways. But I would say music is the main source of this. You can then apply it to other things. So if you understand the mathematics of a chord, you can then use those numbers to actually determine the dimensions of a building, for example. And this was always done historically. There are a couple of things to say, that aside from this assumption of objective beauty, you also have to start with a consensus of something that is beautiful for it to be considered worthy of analysis. And so that normally begins with nature. There's barely anybody, I would say, who doesn't find nature beautiful, the natural world beautiful. Even those who hate God and don't attribute it to a creator love creation. And so you have that consensus that the world is beautiful. And the same in music, you have a consensus that people hear that an octave is there. They can hear the relationships, even to the untrained ear. And what that means then is that if you then apply these theories, if you apply the mathematical formula to a work of art or to a building, or even to order our time or the calendar, which is what is done, if it's true, then there would be a consensus that the things you make are beautiful. If that's true, that's the sign. Now, of course, man is, shall we say, his reason is weak. We must acknowledge that. And so his efforts to apply these things are never going to be as good as God's. So we have to really be patient. And so typically you would look for those things that appear to be beautiful and have withstood the test of time. So as an example of this, I would say where a town that I love, Florence would be the same, or Oxford. These are two beautiful towns where millions of people go every year as tourists. Why do they go there? If you ask them, they say it's the beauty of the towns. And then if you ask them, okay, which buildings are you visiting? Is it the ones that were built on the assumptions and did their best to incorporate these ideas that I've just described? And I describe in more detail, as you say in the book. Or is it the buildings on the outskirts of the town which were designed by architects who rejected all of these ideas, built since the Second World War? And the answer is they go to the old buildings. People vote with their feet. And they have done for centuries in Oxford and in Florence. And I live here in Princeton. I'm in Princeton, New Jersey at the moment. And right up to the Second World War, they built a beautiful campus, and they were looking to tradition and these traditional ideas to create the campus. Since the Second World War, the new builds have been, most of them, not all, have been built on principles that reject all of these ideas, modernist designs. I don't see anybody standing in front of those buildings getting their photograph taken. If you want a wedding photograph, you go to the beautiful arch in the main quad. You don't go to the new art building, ironically, which looks like a filter from an air conditioner or something like that. That's what the locals are saying. That's just about to be completed. So it does require that there is no definitive answer. I can't prove that these traditional forms are beautiful or that this really is an answer to beauty. But what I would say is, well, if a lot of people think it's beautiful over a long period of time, that's a pretty good indicator that it is. And I trust in common judgment. I would tend to, the elites and those, university education on the whole is designed to educate us out of good taste and out of common sense. That's its whole purpose, as far as I can, in the modern university. Mm-hmm. So I would be suspicious of the experts in any of these fields. So I should get that in there.
Well, Michelangelo, I think it was Michelangelo that did the man to show how many heads went from the head to the feet, and what the span of his arms was. Yeah, isn't that Mike? Who was that?
Might be. Well, a number of people. Leonardo.
Leonardo da Vinci. Yeah, that's who it was.
And it's called the Vitruvian Man, mm-hmm. because it was in a book. It was illustrated. The newly rediscovered book of the Roman architect Vitruvius, his books on architecture, where he described these proportions, actually. So yes, the human person is another source, and an idealized person. Obviously, we're all different, but you have to then say, okay, not what are we, but what ought we to be? What is the perfection that nature and man points us to? And that reveals another aspect of beauty, that we say, actually, in its perfection, it raises our hearts and minds to the perfect beauty, who is God. So I would say that all that is beautiful is a sign that either God made it or he inspired its creation, inspired the people who created it.
Yes, I'll have to read more. I'll have to read that, especially that one chapter on geometry again, because there's many numbers in there, and but I understand that, and I really like. I renovated my house 3 times, and always trying to get more and more light, more beauty into the space. And this was a semi-detached house with hardly any light. It was a
Yeah,
challenge, right? It was
yeah,
really a
yeah,
challenge. But it would be very interesting just to mark it out and see what all the proportions are, to see whether I was answering to a geometry that was beautiful.
yeah.
Be interesting.
Well, if it is beautiful, I would say at some level those proportions would be in there, but
Yeah.
it's they're a necessary condition, but not sufficient. What I mean by that is that it's as with music, knowing the rules of harmony and composition and all about polyphony and all the rules doesn't make you a composer. You still have to know how to apply them well, and that's inspiration, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that this doesn't stifle creativity. It's the means by which we become more creative. It's this. It gives us the skills to express those creative ideas well and beautifully. That's true in art or architecture, or um, or in music, in composing. So again, music is easier to grasp because still grasp these ideas because still people insist on the rules of harmony, even if they break them. You have to learn them still. They don't bother in art or even architecture actually at the moment. But there are millions of styles of different music that all use basically the same rules. You can go through centuries. If you look at all the music that's produced now, most of it conforms to a very simple set of rules, but the variety is enormous. It's as great as the number of composers that make it. And so this is the paradox: is that by restricting yourself to these simple principles, it actually allows that creativity to flourish and to blossom within you.
Yes, I see that. I definitely see that. Now, you have another book called A Vision for You. Is that?
Yes,
Yeah.
is it
Okay.
the or the?
That's
Yeah,
what I read. A Vision for You.
yeah. It's
And
actually the vision for you.
oh, the vision.
Yeah,
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 because it's an
yeah,
ideal. Because there's an
yeah,
ideal, so
yeah,
it's the vision for
yeah.
you. And that was very interesting. And so there's also music in this book. There's an idea that to sing the prayers
Mm,
that you will, I guess, garner more inspiration than if
yes.
than not. Let's talk about that a bit. I'm interested in that.
Okay, so there's the famous quote from St. Augustine that those who sing their prayers pray twice. I would say those who then engage with beautiful sacred art pray 3 times. Uh, and then if you consider your posture and you have incense, it's 4 times, 5 times. It's multifaceted. So, but the point here is you're engaging the whole person. Now, I would always focus on the traditional forms of sacred music because, again, by tradition, that experience has shown over a long period of time that it seems to lead us into a deeper participation, the forms of the music. But the structure of the modes, which are the different keys that you get in Gregorian chant and traditional sacred music. There are 8 of them. They actually encapsulate in their fundamental harmonies and the patterns that are used and have developed. So you get repeated patterns of notes which become familiar. Musically, they incorporate, I would say, all the patterns of beauty that I describe mathematically in the book. So you're not aware of the mathematics, of course, as you're singing it. You're listening, you're trying to think about what you're singing, but it's impressing upon our souls and forming our souls in the beauty of the cosmos. Simultaneously, there are the words that we sing. And the meat and drink, if I can call it that, of Christian worship, outside the very core of the Mass, shall we say, in the Liturgy of the Hours especially, which is the daily worship of Christians, are the Psalms. And the Psalms contain all this vivid imagery, which I believe we are made to grasp. It stimulates, the phrase I've heard used, the creative imagination. They are images, they are expressions of human emotion that is done in language that it just seems natural to you. And it fires the imagination. And so that imagery, for example, has become the basis, the DNA, if you can use that phrase, of Western literature. It doesn't mean that every image you see in Western literature is contained within the Psalms. It's amazing how much is, actually. But that ultimately that style of presentation just affects us. Why has it caught on? Well, I would say God speaks to us in ways that he creates us to listen. If, in other words, we are made to see the beauty in nature and to see him in it. We are made to see the word of God in the words that he gives us in inspired scripture. And so the more we immerse ourselves in that and sing the prayers and do it beautifully as best we can, the more we are immersing ourselves in that world of divine beauty and opening our hearts to God. Just as the beautiful sunset, it creates in us a longing. I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for everybody, but I've heard this described by other people. When I see it, I think this is wonderful. And somehow I want to possess it more, and I can't. But what it's actually doing is creating a desire for God. And in our worship, we get what that sunset is creating that yearning for. God gives himself to us. And of course, he's preparing us to receive him through the words, through the sacrament, participation in the sacramental life, I believe, as a Catholic, but also through an immersion in this beautiful art, music, and the words and the emotions and the sentiments that are expressed that go deep to the heart and open us up to receive God. And then, of course, in turn, to give that love back to him and to love our neighbor, to go out and be loving to our neighbor. So it forms us in beauty, it forms us in love. And all of these things go together in harmony, I would say.
No, so do you have a practice in the morning where you do the liturgy
Yes,
of the hours?
Margarita and I pray the Psalms. We have an icon corner, and we light a lamp, and we sing the Psalms. And I do it in English. I do Gregorian tone. I use the Psalter it was from the Book of Common Prayer, actually. So that came through the Anglican Church, but now fully incorporated into Catholic worship through the Anglican Ordinariate. And that's a wonderful way to do it for me, because you go through the whole Psalter through morning and evening prayer on a 30-day cycle. So it gives me enough to be meaty each day, but not so much that it's overwhelming. I've got other things to do. How can you prove that this is worthwhile? I can't. But what I would say is that the moment that I started to do this, and it was a spiritual director when I was living in England from the Little Oratory who suggested that I pray the Psalms, first of all. I always felt it was worth doing. It's one of those things that I just had this conviction that the day seemed to go more smoothly, and I couldn't say why. Um, and maybe what I was sensing was a diminishing of anxiety or fear just by degrees or something like that. It's not as if everything suddenly changed dramatically, but there was just this growing sense that it was worth doing. And so I've been doing this for 25 years, actually probably 30 years now. I've been singing the Psalms in some way. Um, and what's happened over the years is that steadily, as I've made choices about what I do and the life choices, I've ordered my life, the externals of my life, to it more and more. So I'm able then to bring it into my life more deeply. And I see this daily process as forming me for the pinnacle of worship, which is Sunday worship, so the Mass. Or I'm actually Eastern Rite Catholic. I'm Melkite Catholic, not Roman Catholic. So for me, that would be the Divine Liturgy. But it's for Sunday worship and the Eucharist.
Yeah, so I pray the rosary in the morning.
Wonderful.
I've been praying the rosary in the morning for 5 years. And I like this idea. Margarita told me, what you were doing, and I found it very interesting. And how long do you spend in the morning? How long do you
Well,
pray?
now we probably do about an hour or more every morning.
Okay.
I'm motivated to get up early and do it, and I like to do it. But it's expanded. But when I began, I just did. I was told to try and do complet night prayer, which is 10 minutes, and if you can do something in the morning, try and do it. And so the way that I did it was I started gradually, and I could always do something in the morning when I got up, even if it was just 10 minutes, a little bit, a psalm or something like that. And then what I did, once I'd established of at least the habit of stopping and praying morning and night, then I would introduce a prayer just before dinner. And that marks the time of Vespers or evening prayer. And once I've established that, again, it might be very short, then I just broaden those occasions of prayer. I let it happen organically and gradually. I was told that if you jump in and do everything, it just becomes overwhelming and you just give up. So and then it worked both ways. So gradually it inserted itself into my life, and gradually my life changed to give it room to grow. And so that's how I began. The Rosary, I don't, you're very likely aware, I don't know, but it has 150 Hail Marys in the traditional cycle, and it's said that that's effectively the same as the number of psalms. So it's seen as something that can lead us into the psalms, if you see what I mean. And it's a similar sort of thing. It's a regular devotion. I don't pray the Rosary, but I have great devotion to Our Lady, which is expressed through the hymns of the Liturgy of the Hours and the antiphons, and also the other thing is that through doing the Liturgy of the Hours, I become much more aware of the feasts. I'm aware of them anyway, but somehow the Liturgy of the Hours goes much more deeply into the nature of the feast that's being celebrated. And so many of those are Marian or have some impact on Mary as well. And so that's how primarily I express my devotion, I would say.
People have left the church. Like you said, the UK is quite secular.
Yeah.
Canada is quite secular. I've been spending a little bit more time in the States. My daughter lives down there, and I see that there's quite a bit of faith, Protestant faith. There's quite a bit of Protestant faith. I joined the Catholic Church at Easter, so
Wonderful.
I'm in my first year of being a Catholic, and it's been wonderful because it's been very welcoming. People have been very welcoming to me, and this was very interesting because I never felt the same sort of community in the Protestant church. Of course, I left the Protestant church when I was about 13 years old, like lots of people do. Lots of people think, oh, by 13, I know everything. That's part of being 13, isn't it? Knowing everything.
Yeah.
But I have found my way back, thank goodness. And it's been an interesting journey that I've been on, because a woman brought me the rosary in the hospital. I began to pray it, and I continued to pray it every morning. And I had studied yoga for years, from 13 till 50. I'd done it every day, as if I was praying our own Christian religion. I had a practice of yoga, and over time, people have said, "Oh, yoga, that's a bad idea." And yeah, well, in part, maybe it was a bad idea, but it wasn't all a bad idea, because it did help my breath and my body to become in harmony. That's one thing it did, and that's been helpful. So I think that I am a little bit further ahead than I might have been if I hadn't had anything like that. Although I didn't come back to the church until much, much, much later.
Yes, that's interesting. I mean, I'm now 62.
I'm
And of course,
63.
there you go. So as you get older, you become aware of aches and pains and getting stiffer. And, so what used to be, exercise used to mean all cardio. How far am I going to run? Now exercise is about just getting into a fit condition to be even able to run a step. So I did a lot of investigation actually in latter years into yoga, because there's clearly great physical benefits there, and trying to work out whether there was a danger. I must admit, I don't have any problem with the postures, with the stretches. Some people warn me against those. I don't think that we need to worry about those. Otherwise, if I stretch and change a light bulb, I might be letting the devil in or something. I just don't believe I'm in that much danger. I don't like the spiritual baggage which tends to go with it. So what I've done is I've taken those exercises myself. But even then, if we're not consenting to that, or we could somehow shut that out, I think we're fine. What I will say is the great thing about it, and this is something that I've always been interested to investigate further, is that I do think that there is a connection spiritually to what you do with your body, because man is a profound unity of body and soul. So it's no surprise that people have a sense of being spiritually well if they are healthy and fit. And yoga does something in that it stretches the joint it in a different way from most other exercises that people do. I think it could come as well just from a good stretching routine if you did the physical side of it. But the manner in which it's done encourages us to believe that there is a unity of body and soul. And I think that's a good thing. I think we should look at that. And if we could, Christianity has always looked at other cultures. I know this from art. We're not afraid to engage. We engage with it, take what's consistent with the gospel, reject the rest, incorporate it, then turn it round and speak to the society that gave it to us in a Christian way. So I'm very interested in that. And so I have a whole string of exercises. I must admit, I don't go to a yoga class, but I do things like that. I have to, otherwise I couldn't walk. I'd have a bad back and bad knees all the time and everything. But I do think it's connected to spirituality. Like you, there's something there. Like most things, because it's not fully Christian, shall we say, the danger is more in what it lacks than what it doesn't have than what it does have, and not appreciating that the full understanding of all these things, I do believe, is in the person of Christ and in the Catholic faith. And so, I'm careful. I think about these things, but I'm not scared. We engage. This is the wonderful thing about the Christian faith, is that we believe in the reality of matter and of spirit, and the unity of both, the harmony of both, shall we say, to come back to that phrase. And so we should be thinking about that more and more, I think.
Yes, I agree. It was good for me, but my intention was always to be looking for what was best, and also I wasn't. It probably didn't. When I really needed something deep and spiritual to sustain me, I had to come back to Christianity. I needed the scripture. I needed the relationship with the scripture and with Christ. I needed that. In the end, it was obvious to me that was true, but I think that the study that I did, and I wonder about it a little bit, but as you said, if you take what is good, the exercises, the breathing, the focus on what is best, and leave the rest, you can bring what is beneficial to our culture and incorporate it. We're good at incorporating.
Yes. And the other thing is that I was interested because my mission is to evangelize the culture, is to save the West. You might as well aim high and just see how far you can get.
Yes.
But this is clearly has become, like it did for you, the source of spiritual nourishment for a secular society, in effect. So I'm interested to know how yoga did that. I was interested to know how yoga did this. I've met people who had no faith and got into spirituality, not the sort of spirituality that I want, and in many ways on a journey that might be dangerous actually, but nevertheless it stimulated in them through a desire that was purely about the body, keeping fit, in simple terms. It opened up a spiritual dimension and a spiritual yearning in those people. Very often it was misdirected, but my response to that we must learn how to use this, because this might be the only way to stimulate that interest in many, many people. Because we worship the body and fitness in the wrong sort of way in modern society. We're mistaking the temple for the god, in effect, or the window for the view, or something like that. But there's a natural desire for God that it's stimulating, even if it's subsequently misdirected. And I think we should look at that and work out how we can direct it well and use it.
Yes, I agree with that too. Oh, so you have had art in all kinds of churches, and this has been happening for how long has this been happening? And is it still happening? Are you still creating art for churches?
I'm still painting art, and I'm still painting sacred art. So the I'll, t- I'll tell you the story of my first ever commission, and just to show you how these things happen. So when I set out, it goes back to this process of discernment with this guy, David, which I describe in the vision for you. And what he said to me is, you just do one step at a time. You aim for the highest thing, because as long as it's good, if God's with you, it can happen. And you never know where it's going to take you or what your contribution could be. But this is the homing signal. This is what's leading you forward. And so I said, I want to transform Western culture in my art. I want to have a piece of art in the Brompton Oratory, which is this wonderful church in London, has this beautiful liturgy, and was so instrumental in my coming into the church. And so I was learning to paint, and I was going for spiritual direction to one of the fathers there. So they knew about me a little bit. And I remember thinking about this and saying that actually my goal, if I get a commission for the Brompton Oratory, I feel that will be the culmination of my artistic career. I can't imagine anything greater than that. And what happened is I just formulated this vision And I got a phone call from my spiritual director saying, we'd like you to come in and discuss a commission. Okay. So I'd never had one before. And it was for this saint called Luigi Scrosoppi, who was an oratorian who just been made a saint. So I had to investigate him. And I had no idea how much to charge. I knew I wanted to do this commission. I didn't want to price myself out of it. I hope they don't mind me telling this story. It's so long
No,
ago.
it's good.
The prices are, yeah. So anyway, I went in. I talked to Father Ronald, and he said, "Oh, you must charge a realistic price." I had no idea what it was. So I went in and I said, "I think I can do this for £800." And the provost, Father Ignatius, said, "I'm very sorry, but we can't go above 3,000." So I said, "Okay, 3,000." And he said, "You drive a hard bargain." He said, and I felt really pleased until I delivered it, and we went straight to the framers and we got it sized up, measured up for one of those ornate Baroque frames that sticks. It was stuck out about 8 inches from the wall, carved and gilded, and and the frame cost more than the painting. At which point I thought I should have asked for more. It was the first one I ever did. And what happened is, I don't think some of the fathers liked it that much because it's since been taken down since when the provost moved on. But I have to say I don't mind because I can still tell the story about it. And I would do a lot better if I was given that commission now. So I don't mind that it's not there because I don't think it showcases my talents well. But I could still point to the commission. And so once I had that, though, then that opened doors for me. So I've been commissioned by the Brompton Oratory. Other people would take a shot on me, and then you build up a portfolio and you point to it, and then they ask you to do it. But what I would say, it did mean that I, in many ways, felt comfortable just accepting commissions that I could take. The painting, from that point on, didn't become the sole focus because I felt as though I'd done what I wanted to do in many ways. I always want to do some painting, but it meant that I became as interested in re-establishing art schools, these programs that introduce creativity and apprehension of beauty to non-artistic people, a program we call The Way of Beauty, which incorporates a lot of what David told me and is in the Vision for You, but with methods of stimulating creativity based upon a traditional artistic training and then adapted to be presented to all people. And then the work that I do now, I should say also that when I was at Thomas More College, I just painted continuously large-scale works for the chapel, and it's still there in New Hampshire. But the work I do now is largely for books because I'm interested in encouraging families and people to pray at home with icon corners. And so I produce work for books. I've got a number of projects on, and I had one published as well, where you have high quality reproductions which can be removed and put into a frame. And then you describe to people how to pray with them and how to create an icon corner. I had a book called The Little Oratory, which I co-wrote with someone called Lila Lawler, where it did that. It just explained to people how to do it, and they could use the images in the book. I'm currently working on 2 books, one with Margarita on the Marian feasts and Mary, and I'm doing art for that. And that could work in conjunction with liturgical prayer and an icon corner as well. And then another one on how to combine this and giving musical instruction and praying the Psalms, but that would feature the major feasts of the year. And so I'm producing all these color plates for that, where the final product isn't the painting I paint, it's actually the photograph that goes in the book. So you have slightly different considerations. So these aren't appearing in churches, they're appearing in the domestic church. Let's put it like that, in people's homes, I hope.
What do you think about the domestic church?
I think that this is Well, I will echo the words of Benedict XVI, who said he felt that uh, the driving force for the new evangelization, in other words, for us to evangelize in the modern era, is the domestic church. It's families praying together. Um, it's you can have a focus through the liturgy of the hours, which is liturgical, which primes us then with a desire for the Eucharist, even for those who aren't Catholics. It takes people to, I believe, to Catholicism.
Yeah, I kind of believe
And
that too. You know,
yeah,
I prayed the
yeah,
rosary. It took me to Jesus. It took me to Catholicism.
yeah.
I was a Protestant. I didn't know that would happen.
Well, it's I've seen it, and I think all of these. So it's a practice. It also is something that could be ecumenical. One of the things I'm very interested in is that in America, again, we are preserving the West. Easy to do this in America. How do we have Christians need to come together, and they need to worship and pray together. Um, Ecumenical efforts tend to be dissatisfying for everybody on the whole. They're sort of lowest common denominator events that don't don't resonate with any of the people present. But actually, if we come together and pray the Psalms in worship, we can do that during the week. So we don't need to have arguments about transubstantiation or anything, dwell on the differences. We can come together. And I don't know of any Christian denomination that is unhappy about praying the Psalms. And so not only then can we have a family or a household praying, but you can invite your neighbors in. It's a wonderful evening, actually. We try and have social evenings where we have vespers or evensong, which we sing, and we invite people to join in. And I lead it as best I can, and then we just have a meal and we just chat, and somehow it just brings people together in a special way. It's interesting you talked about the Catholic Church giving you community. I was interested by that because it's always portrayed as being strong on communion. In other words, through God we're connected, but not necessarily so strong on fellowship as the Protestants. But my thought is that this is a way that we can stimulate this. It's also a bottom-up way of transforming the culture. I'm not looking to centralized authorities or the church as an institution to do this. It's something we can just, as good Christians, we can roll up our sleeves and do. And in America particularly, Christians need to support each other. They need to come together and evangelize the culture as a Christian culture in order to save all the institutions that we love in the West.
So in the morning, households can be very, very busy because the kids are going to school and the parents are going to work. And so although I've always done a morning practice, but you talk about this the evening, and that is when everybody comes home, often still comes home to have dinner together, which is really important. It's really, really important time for families to be together. And if this could be also the time of prayer, then it would enrich it so much more.
Yes, and Vespers and an evening meal go together. And again, the wonderful thing about this is you don't have to follow the exact formulae that are given in the books. As lay people, we have the right to cut things out, to change things. If you just do one of the Psalms of the day and you just sang that as a family before the meal, that would be great. It's the repeated practice, even if it's just a little bit, is really good. I'll just tell a little story here. What gave me the idea for doing all this in the family scenario in the domestic church was I stayed with an Orthodox family, and what they did was every night before they went to bed, they sang night prayer, maybe 15 minutes. And they sang it, very simple chant. It was all what we call recto tono, in other words, on one note. And so he would just do it like that, and then the father would sing a stanza, and then the son, and then the daughter, and then the other son. And so they would go round in turn doing it. And he worked out a rota, so right down to the smallest, everybody sang a stanza of a psalm. Now, what happened at one point was that a fight broke out between two of the kids who were arguing over whose turn it was to sing the psalm. And Dad, of course, had to step in and pull them apart. So don't worry, you'll get your. I thought, wow, that's the fighting that's going on in this family. We're in a pretty good place here. But it was clear to me they enjoyed doing it. And I've seen this. Children really love this. Also, I would say that especially one of the parents leading this, it's a natural role, but actually we worry, of course, about the crisis of fatherhood and the roles of mothers and fathers. I would say that in the family, the natural leader of this is the father, actually. If the father doesn't, then the mother should as well, as best they can. But this, if anything, this is where father can come into his own. Everything else, we can have a discussion, we can work out what works best. But the advocate to God on behalf of the family, as Christ is the head of the church, the father is the head of the family. That's where I would make that emphasis. And I would say also that it's something that one of the parents, again, you have to work with the situation. No one's got the perfect nuclear family, so you've got to be adaptable, okay? But if nobody else does it, if they know that dad is there and he always sings evening prayer on his own, there's an invitation to join, and very often they don't want to, they're too busy or something, but there's an invitation. And sometimes maybe when they're young, you say you have to do it, but basically it's an invitation. They will see that repeated pattern of prayer. And what struck me is when I was seeing this family is that it actually takes the pressure off the parents because, as we know, all the modern psychology. I mean, you and Jordan would know a lot more about this than me, but there's a tendency to blame everything on the culture and the parents. What happens in the and negate free will. But if there is an influence from the parents, the great message that this says to the children is actually, while we should honor our father and our mother, remember that your father and your mother are honoring someone who is greater than them, who is God. That's what it says. So the ultimate standard of goodness, don't worry, it's not your parents. It's the ideal that they're striving to live up to. And so it actually allows us to be less than perfect. In the very fact of doing that tells the children that we know that we're not perfect. We're doing our best. Of course, we follow what our parents do, but ultimately the parents know that they're following another. They're not the end of this line of authority.
That is a good message. Now, is the singing at Vespers the Psalms as well?
Yes, the Psalms are core to this. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh boy, that sounds exciting to me. I'm excited by these things for
Great.
sure. Well, I think that was, I've seen someone in my family. I won't say who, but he and his wife have little kids, and they sing to the kids at night when they go to bed. But they're not. It's not the Psalms. It's Baby Beluga or something like that. And I have a desire. I have a desire or a prayer that it does become the Psalms, because I think, well, the kids need it, and they're my grandchildren, so they need it. So I do hope for this to be something that people take a chance on, because I think from my experience, there's gifts there that are indescribably they're like diamonds. There's diamonds in there that we can take away with for us. I had a dream the other night. I think I mentioned it in an email. I'd been reading your book, and I have dreams sometimes, but not always. But I had a dream anyway. I dreamt that there was this little. It was like a black. It was black. It was in black and white. So that's pretty it was obvious, right? Black and white. So it was bluntly straightforward. And it was a black piece of tableau, kind of, and it had white lettering on it, and it said, "Hearts matter. Hearts matter." And I was busy trying to make it into something that could hang or something. And then the scene changed, and there was a little boy, and he jumped into his father's arms. And so I talked to Jordan about that. We like to talk about my dreams, and we thought heart matters, but this is about hearts mattering, and to get to the heart of the matter to get to the heart of the matter, right? So there's that too, which I only just thought of now. Get to the heart of the matter. So that's very interesting. But there's action in it. So the boy had to jump to the father. There's action. It's our action that makes this all happen. So that was a very cool dream.
Yes. What immediately springs to my mind as you speak is that one of the key aspects of this process that David, all those years ago, impressed upon me was that he said, first of all, he said, look, one of the conditions I'm giving this to you freely. One of the conditions is you must be prepared to pass it on to others. So I've mentored people through this since. But he also insisted that I get involved in serving others in some voluntary basis. It seemed to have nothing to do with what I was aiming for at all. And he just said, this is a formation in love. And he said, in the ideal, you want to find as a practice something where, if you can, and again, this depends on the person. I was single, I didn't have family obligations, immediate family obligations, but where you're helping people who have no connection to you and are unable to give you anything back. He said, because then it's an expression of love that is not demanding a quid pro quo in any way. So I volunteered to help street people and homeless people, actually. Reluctantly, I did it because he told me to do it. It's not as if I suddenly had a great mission, but it did change me. What happened to me was that I was effectively, at the start of this process, was objectifying those people. I'm doing this so I can tell David I'm doing it. He'll keep giving me the information. But I noticed that what happened was that at some point, and not that long, it didn't take that long for it to happen, I actually was interested in the people I was helping. I remember he told me to ask questions like, how are you? I didn't even know how to engage with people. And I remember asking somebody that he gave me these open questions. This is how you have a conversation, okay? And I remember asking that question, and then it occurred to me that I was actually interested in the answer. I wasn't waiting for the person to speak so I could just mechanically ask the next question. And it had transformed me. And it was the action that had led the heart and mind, if you like. So sometimes the intellect can lead it, sometimes the body, like the yoga, can lead it. But all of these ways are ways into what should be, in the ideal, a harmony of body and soul, of action and motive. And that's love. And that's why the heart, the core of us, to use the French word, is it Latin? It is at the core, because it's the place where we're talking about that deepest place, which is the vector sum of all our thoughts and actions and motives. That effectively says where we are. And that's the human center of gravity, that where their heart is, because that's what people actually do. And we want the heart to be in harmony with God's desires for us. And again, it's a question of beauty helping us in that regard, I would say.
So this is more of a personal question. How has prayer with visual imagery, because you use visual image, I have a prayer corner that I set up, but when I read about you, I realized that I had Mother Mary on the right and Christ on the left, so I got to switch
Oh,
those.
did you? Okay. Well,
Well,
it's not a showstopper. I wouldn't
no,
worry.
it's not a
That's good.
showstopper.
Yeah, but
Anyway,
I follow the tradition. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, but
Fine.
that's the
Yeah.
tradition is Mother Mary
Yeah.
on the left, Christ. Oh,
Yeah.
and then, no, Christ crucified in the middle,
Yes.
and then on the right,
The risen Christ, Christ
the
in
risen
glory.
Christ. Yeah.
So it might be Christ in majesty, or just some a blessing Christ, a pantocrator. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I've been given many different icons. So all these little icons are around there too. So it's not as organized as it might be, but it's a really good place to be.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
out in the front of the house on the porch, but the porch is all enclosed in stained glass. So I can see out. The sun comes in, but I'm in a place that's secure.
Right.
I like that place a lot. And if my husband comes out and he looks to see if I'm there, he hasn't joined me. I don't try to scare him away, but he hasn't yet joined me. That doesn't matter. It'll come. It'll come when it comes, right?
Well, I'm
Not
sure
a-
he knows the invitation's there. So,
He does. He knows the invitation's there. That's right. That's right. So when it comes to, conversion and personal transformation, and I'd say you've been on this journey a long time, and I'm now on this journey. What guidance can you give those who are on the brink of pivotal change?
Gosh, it's very difficult to give general advice because I'd want to talk to the person and say, okay, where are you? What are you thinking about? But yes, here's something that happened to me. So David, again, my mentor, I'll just follow his example because he was my teacher and I tend to use his principles. So I was thinking about Christianity, I was thinking about Catholicism, and one thing that was interesting, he suggested I read Malcolm Muggeridge, who I don't know if that name means anything to. He was a very
Yes, I
well-known
had lunch
name.
with him. I've had
Oh,
lunch with
really?
him. Oh, my
wow.
goodness, he is a delightful person. He brings
Okay.
light into the space.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. I believe that his family lives in Canada as well, or something. Anyway, but I'd heard that. Anyway, I wondered if that was the connection. But anyway, so he, he's someone who spent, excuse me, as far as I can tell, most of his life on the brink of becoming Catholic. Decades he was thinking about it. He admired the Catholic Church. He would write about it. And I think he was about 80 or something in his late 70s when eventually he was received into the church. So there's a whole body of work written by him, and he is a wonderful, wonderful writer. I mean, from my point of view, his prose is as beautiful as any that I've read. I'm not a literary scholar. In fact, I don't resonate with a lot of great literature, but his writing, it just flows off the page like honey, I would say. And he talks a lot about his being at that point on the brink of becoming Catholic, right the way down to his autobiography, his book about Mother Teresa. He's the one who made Mother Teresa famous.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he wrote a book called Something Beautiful for God, and then they made a little documentary on that. And so I read that. So I think the answer is adopting that principle is to look for people who've been in your position and ask them the question. And if you don't know anybody and you're on the brink of making a decision, then I found Malcolm Muggeridge a great help because he seemed to articulate all the hesitancy, all the worries, as well as all the attractions.
And he would know,
yeah.
I think because he'd spent so many time in psychiatric.
Oh, did he? I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh, yeah, he
right.
was a psychiatrist. So he was
Ah.
he was in prisons. He was dealing with people who were very lost, very lost. So he would know really the whole scenario of people who are searching and lost and finding. He would know it. He would know all of that. It's no wonder. It's no wonder he has. But he's so poetic.
Yes.
I was we met him in London, in England anyway, somewhere. And he came to have lunch with Jordan, and I was there. And so that's how
Wow.
I got to meet him. But oh my goodness. And Jordan is a fan
Wow.
of his.
Well, that's great. I mean, his work, I don't hear much about him now. I mean, he died some years ago, but uh, his work, his books deserve to be known, I think. I mean, I found them extremely helpful. I just read everything he'd written, which spanned decades of his life, but became for me, a few months in mine, shall we say?
Yeah, right,
And
right.
he led me through it. Yeah.
Huh. Well, I'll have to read his. I haven't read any of that, so I have work to do.
Oh well. Okay.
Oh dear. So, can you give my listeners key points in the book, the vision for you, so that they could have some idea of what you're offering there?
Yes. So what it I'll tell you what it does to us before I go into the detail of what the process actually is and what you do. But it is a process of discerning what in the Catholic Church we call personal vocation. So it's your God's calling for you. But this is in the broader sense. It's not am I meant to be. It's not restricted to am I meant to be married or a priest or a nun or a monk or something like that, religious. That it would include that, but it's really your whole life vision. And the premise behind it is that God wants us to be happy, and he doesn't make it difficult for us to know him or to discern it. And so it's a process of examination of what we really love to do. And we're led into discerning this in very particular ways. And that is a bit of a process, but it's not difficult, but it takes a little bit of work. And then we examine it and say, is this good or is it bad? And so I immediately said, I want to be an artist. Now, that doesn't mean I have to serve the church. It doesn't mean I have to do religious art. The question is the process of, is there anything intrinsically sinful or bad about art? The answer is no, depending on what I paint. And so that means then that that's a good thing to do, and there's a reason to believe that that's what God is calling me to do. Then what you do is you just make a start. And so what I did was just sign up for an art class in the local art school. And I remember saying to David, I think I might have mentioned this earlier, I'm going to need years and years of evening classes to train. And he said, it doesn't work like that. You just take that first step. You've got your great goal. You take that first step. And as long as it's getting you nearer to where you're meant to go, then you take it. You worry about the second step after you've taken the first. And if this is meant to be, then doors will open. You'll meet people. And you can't really plan it. So you don't do it step by step. There's no harm in planning it, but you're always ready to be pragmatic and take new directions and see what doors open. Now, there are a couple of caveats there. He said that this is based upon an assumption of a relationship with God, and we're listening to God's call. So the initial exercises were focused on deepening that relationship with God. There's a process of deep examination of conscience, reparation for harms done, quite systematic. We have to do service because it's transformational, and the more we love, the more we grow in love. So he was insistent that I had to do these things, and he said also that I had to cultivate gratitude for what I have. That if the goal here is to be happy, you have to understand that even if I became an artist, if I achieve these goals, I will not be happy unless I have a relationship with God. And I can have a relationship with God before I get there. I can do that today. So he said, in the process, we learn how to be joyful and happy. And this is something that can be learned. It can be cultivated in the present. because then we enjoy the journey as well. And that's what it becomes, is really what I realized he was doing with me, is he was showing me the way as well as the destination. And of course, if that way is Christ, he's both the means and the end. He's the way we get there, and he is the end himself. And so that's what this is. And a lot of this is traditional Christian teaching, but a lot of it also were his insights into how to discern vocation. I use his voice a lot in the book. He was funny. He was very, very funny, sharp, not diplomatic. He could be pretty harsh, but he was very funny. And the way he made me take the leap, for example, he said to me, okay, I'm going to give you a daily routine, which will start you on this. This is foundational. It was prayer, meditation, and service. So that would be weekly, but a little bit of service, bit of reading. And he said, do you believe in God? I said, no. He said, well, are you willing to believe? So I said, yes. And he said, well, willingness is measured in action. So what you do is you act as though God exists, even if you don't believe, and you see whether it works. And that will be enough. In fact, what he was giving me was Pascal's wager in one form or another. I didn't realize that. But he gave me this routine, and he said, try this for 30 days. And if you don't like it, we will return your misery with interest. So immediately I laughed. I thought, I can do that. I can try this for 30 days. And that was enough. I knew, a bit like praying the Psalms, nothing radically changed in 30 days, except I could feel I was changing. There was this sense of, a little spark of a sense of purpose, of direction, and less fear, I would say.
So you describe in your book resentment and fear being, and I liked how you said resentment is all the things that you have happened, that you're revisiting, that you haven't been able to let go, say. And fear is trepidation about what is to come.
Yes.
And so those two things take care of both of those, the future and the past.
That's it.
Yeah. So that was very interesting. I've delved into self-reflection and gone through processes like that, but to describe it like that was very helpful, I thought. And what else did I want to say about that? Yes, right. And writing down everything that you remember about what you might be angry about, who you might be angry at, places you might be angry at, institutions you might be angry at, just writing it all down. And writing it all down, and also how it makes you feel. Was that part of it?
Yes. So we don't know we're resentful unless we feel it. So
right.
There's the self-pity or there's anger. Those are the two feelings in there. So you rewrite that down. But then you analyze in a rather detached way, actually, the self-centeredness that is giving rise to this resentment. And the premise here is that if I'm unhappy, I'm separated from God in some way, because if I'm in union with God, I'm happy. That the happiness and God go together, shall we say, for me. So I'm always reacting in some way in a self-centered way to the events going around. Maybe perfectly natural, maybe perfectly understandable. I don't need to reproach myself unduly about this. It's not, but usually it's an involuntary reaction. I just respond. But it is sin in that sense, that it is a response that separates me from God. And so we can look at what those fears are, what the anxieties, what the self-centered aspect of this is. Somehow I'm afraid this is going to affect me in a way I don't like. And you do that, and then you acknowledge it and you ask God for forgiveness. I actually found the Eastern liturgy very helpful here in understanding this, because in the prayers, as you know, in the Eastern liturgy, there's endless Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. It goes on and on and on. But somehow they're sung joyfully for a start. It's a great confidence that God will give us mercy. We know that we need it, but He is loving and compassionate, and that's infinite. And I feel that with all those endless Kyries. But the other thing is that at various junctures in the liturgy, we do pray for forgiveness of sins, voluntary and involuntary, known and unknown. And so what it's saying is there is this natural drift because of our fallen nature away from God. And I heard it described in church as rather like children unknowingly just wandering away from their parents into the road or something like that. You don't blame them. It just happens. And what do? You run out and you pick them up and you carry them back, and you're just so pleased that they're safe. And that's what God is like with us. And so much of what we do is just this sometimes unknown. The resentments and the fears are known. We're aware that we're feeling these things, but many of them are involuntary. I'm not choosing to be like that. I just react like that. It's happening at I've heard it described pre-conscious level. It's deep in the heart and it just happens. So I can't do anything about that first reaction, but I can do something about it afterwards. I can say, okay, this is what the problem is. God, please forgive me. Thank you very much. But it presupposes a loving God, not a stern, harsh, condemning God. It opens the door to joy. And the more that I do this, because of this rather different view of sin that I had, where I'm at fault, I've contravened a rule. More, it's just I'm separated from God in some way, whatever the cause. I'm in a state of sin. The more that I do this, the more my sense of God's love grows, because every day there's something that doesn't go my way and I'm fed up about it. So usually little things, but sometimes big. And always I can ask God for help, and I can see that there's a reason for this, there's a meaning, or believe that there is, even if I can't see it, because I trust more and more in God's love.
So at the beginning, you might have quite an emotional response to the recognition that you're separate from God, but as time goes by, it can become more objective, and so
I
less
think,
triggering,
yeah,
right? Mm-hmm.
I think that's exactly it. And of course, to even get to the point where you're ready to say the problem isn't what that person did to me, it's my response. That's why I'm unhappy. And be able to say it's not a judgment on the right and wrong of what happened. There is evil in the world. There are bad people. There is injustice. So it's not denying that, but it's saying my unhappiness at that situation is down to me not being able to accept that and realize that God permits evil so that a greater good can occur. Yeah, that's a huge step. That's a huge leap. I mean,
It
to
takes
get to that
practice,
point.
right? It takes practice to get there.
Practice and just a good mentor. I had David
Yeah,
to explain this
right,
to me, and then
right.
also a certain level of broken spirit, shall we say, that being ready to follow direction.
Humility, yes.
Humility, yes. I was unhappy. I was deeply unhappy. It wasn't just I wanted to be an artist. I had many things going on. I was lonely, even though I had a social life. I felt directionless. I got a degree from Oxford. The world should be my oyster, and I was miserable. And I didn't feel I was doing what I ought to do, and all this was. Anyone from the outside say, "What on earth have you? You've got no reason to be unhappy," and I was. But that led me to the point where I was ready to listen to this guy. And you don't have to reach a crisis, but in my case, it helped. Is what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I had to reach a crisis.
Okay. Yeah.
And I had many opportunities to turn towards God, but I had a very strong self-will.
Okay.
So it took me a very long time
Wow.
to find the grace of God, that's for sure. But I did. Or he
That's
brought it
wonderful.
to me.
Yeah.
It was good. It was love, actually. It was love, right? It was love between my son and I, of seeing the love that I had for him returned to me, that brought me a real relationship, a personal relationship with God. I really felt it in my body. And that love that, you give love to your children, but it's not often that you have an opportunity to say, I'm going to leave you forever, and to see what the response of that person is. Because the response that he gave me when I told him I had cancer and I was going to die, they told me within the year, and I went home and I told him that. And he was, I could see it in his eyes. He was going to lose his mother. And that was me. And he was very upset. He was, he was grieving. And I realized that I was worth saving, or at least fighting for. Not saving necessarily, but fighting for. And I hadn't even realized that before. So it really did take a real challenge for me to understand what I had been doing, which was always feeling like I was in control and that I was leading my life. And it turned out that I wasn't, not at all. There were things much, much bigger than me. But even though there were things much, much bigger than me, I was still worth fighting for. I didn't have to be in control to be fit. I could be humble and small and still be worth fighting for. Didn't matter. That was a good thing to learn. That was such a good thing to learn. And that gave me joy, right? Because I didn't have to be anything more than nothing, really. And I was still worth fighting for. What a joy that is to realize. Yeah.
Well, again, I always come back to this guy, David, who I refer to. But there's everyone talks about having low self-esteem. And David always used to say, the problem isn't low self-esteem, it's not high self-esteem. It's the very fact that we're trying to esteem ourselves that makes us self-centered and unhappy. So stop thinking about yourself, work with other people.
Yeah.
And
it helps the relationships. That's what
Yeah.
helps. Yeah.
And this, I was not the worst person going around. I'm not going to present myself as the devil incarnate or something, but I was neglectful. I certainly had a lot of room for improvement. Let's put it like that. And what happened to me is that by doing this systematic approach with these people that I didn't know, I was able to bring that by degrees into the other relationships that I had, naturally and organically. And this is what you described is what I noticed is that, in fact, I've talked about this on occasion, that the more I do this, the nicer everybody else gets.
Yes.
Because actually they're responding to, and sometimes I don't know what it is. So I'm not presenting myself as the perfect and most likable person. I know I've got a long way to go, but I do think I'm more in the good direction than I used to be. But you see it in how people respond to you in ways that are just unexpected at times. And that's a delight because I know that isn't me. I know the natural me doesn't get there. I know that this is God working through me. And I do my best not to take the credit for it, remind myself, actually, this is God. It's not, to the degree that any of this happens, it's a gift. It's a gift that I'm given.
Yes. And that gives us a chance to start another day with the hope that there will be an opportunity also to learn again how to get closer to God by recognizing how mixed up and self-absorbed we are.
Yeah, it's the sort of paradox of the whole of this process is that in many ways it's a sort of Groundhog Day. You get up and you repeat. And, I've been doing, Sunday worship every Sunday, and I have to keep doing it, and it's these cycles of repetition. But unlike Groundhog Day, it's not enclosed in on itself. It's actually a spiral that works its way up to heaven. I'm turning around, repeating a cycle, but it's taking me up. It's reinforcing and adding each time I do it incrementally. And so, whereas in the past, this routine and these cycles would have been boredom. That would have been everything I was trying to escape with distraction and novelty.
That must be Jacob's ladder, is it?
Something like that, yeah. Or perfect, yeah. Jacob's ladder. It's leading us up to the repeated actions build on each other and deepen the sense that I'm doing the right thing.
I imagine slowly the things that we're responding to are different. It seems the same. It seems that we are at the beginning all the time. But it isn't exactly the beginning. Maybe it is that our surrender is faster. That's part of it. Eh? The surrender is faster. It's like, oh yeah, I'm being an idiot. That can, the faster that happens, the better. Yeah.
It is, and now I'm responding to what you said. I hadn't thought of it quite that way until you said it. I think you're absolutely right. And you start to notice the extraordinary and the ordinary, if you know what I mean. That things that you see things afresh that you didn't before, and you see it also when people have a faith experience. They have a shift internally from that of this nature. We notice a spark in people's eyes. Their demeanor is different. Can't put your finger on it, but there's something different. And I think also the person who goes through that sees the world differently. Even things that are very familiar to them suddenly become signs of the glory of God in a way that they never did before. And other people too, as well, actually, on my better moments. Yeah.
So we're trying to, and Jordan and I are trying to save Western civilization too, but it takes us all, right? And I had another, vision of pulling everyone along with me and realizing, though, no, that won't work. Everyone has to pull exactly the same. Like everybody has to be pulling towards God. It's not up to me. It's up to me to do my part, but it's up to everyone to do their part.
Yeah.
And so what can you say maybe in closing that would be aspiring to advice to people, to artists, to people who are searching? If you're not feeling joy and happy, then that's an indication that you're searching, right?
Yes.
What could you say to some of those people to inspire them?
I mean, I would refer to my own experience, because I've encapsulated in these books. So I'm going to, I know it's a sort of selling pitch, but I'm referring to the vision for you. But my experience in this is that, and what I've seen in others, every single one of us has a calling from God. And when we discover that, then we actually contribute creatively to the culture, to society. The Marxist ideology, which is sort of an anti-religion, it's a quasi-religion that has a utopia, but its goal is destruction of society. Flatten it, and then out of the ashes grow, in some way that they never explain, something new and wonderful, all based upon the laws of science or something like that in the pattern of history. What we're talking about here is an engagement with the culture that transforms it. We transform ourselves first, God works through us, and then we contribute our part. And we change the culture one personal relationship at a time. And what I would say is that I'll give this one little story to finish, and this is in the book. Um, I had this idea. I wanted to establish art schools. I needed help. And eventually, when I was in Florence, actually, there was a priest there called Father Timothy Verdon, an American, who was on the staff of the Duomo. Now, all these people, he'd been a Yale art history professor who'd become a priest, and although American, was on the Italian staff in the church then. And all the people at places like Cecil Studios, the Catholics, they all wanted to get to meet him because they thought they could help him. Now, by one way or another, a set of coincidences, I ended up sitting in front of him. And so I said, I want to tell you about these art schools. And he listened to me. And at the end, he had one or two, he said, I think this would work. I think your ideas are sound. So I've got one or two suggestions. And they were very good. And then I thought, okay, this is it. He's now going to tell me, and I'm going to introduce you to this person, and this person has money, we'll establish. And he said, but I can't help you, he said. I've got far too much going on. I think you have to do this. And then he said, but I really want to encourage you to do this. I think this is your vocation because you clearly love this, and this is what God intends you to do. And he said, but I can't even promise you you'll ever open an art school. What I will say is that as you travel on that path, you are going to draw people to God because they will see that you are fulfilled in what you're doing. And many of those people you will never know or meet, or you will have met them, but you won't know the effect you're having on these people. They won't tell you. It'll be an impression. Some of them might tell you. But I'm certain that this is what you ought to do. And I would say everybody has that calling. This process that I described worked for me. And you don't need, I wasn't Christian when I started. I was doing things consistent with the Christian faith. And eventually I became Christian, but they worked for me before I became Christian. That was convinced me that there was a truth that underlay them. So this really is open to everybody if you're ready to do certain things. The Pascal wager, act as though God exists and see if he does.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's lovely. Well, thank you very much. It was really nice to meet you.
Lovely. Absolute pleasure. It really was. Yeah,
and I hope that we meet in person. Oh, I think that we're maybe you'll come to the tour date that Jordan and I have outlined when we come to New Jersey.
Yes, we're planning on it. It's in the calendar.
Oh, yeah, so, that'll be lovely.
I certainly would. Yeah,
great.
Like to do that. Yeah,
oh, that's
look
great.
Forward to it very much indeed.
And I really like your books, and we'll make sure that we have the books in the description.
Thank you.
So that people know where to get them. And you have a number of books. I'm aware of 3 books. But if there's more books, then I need to know what they are too.
All right. I'll send the list to you. There's one other.
Send the list to us, yeah.
I will. Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, well,
okay, that's wonderful.
It was my pleasure. The pleasure was all mine, really.
Thank you.